This is page 126 of It by Stephen King, featuring Pickles. He's my reading buddy. There I was, my body 9 miles ahead of my feet. You can't keep your balance. Sooner or later you fall right on your face. Except I didn't, because you caught me. She put her tea aside and lit a cigarette, her eyes never leaving him. He could only see that her hands were shaking in the minute jitter of the lighter flame, which darted first to the right of the cigarette end and then to the left before finding it. She drew deep, blew out a fast jet of smoke. What do I know about you? I know you seem to have it all under control. I know that. You never seem to be in a hurry to get to the next drink or to the next meeting or to the next party. You seemed confident that all those things would be there, if you wanted them. You talked slow. Part of it was the main draw, I guess, but most of it was just you. You were the first man I ever met out there who dared to talk slow. I had to slow down to listen. I looked at you, Bill, and I saw someone who never ran on the walkway because you knew it would get him there eventually. Because he knew it would get him there eventually. You seemed utterly untouched by the hype and hysteria. You didn't lease a roll so you could drive down Rodeo Drive on a Saturday afternoon with your own vanity plates on some glitzy rental company's car. You didn't have a press agent to plant items in Variety or The Hollywood Reporter. You'd never done the Carson show. Writers can't unless they also do card tricks or bend spoons, he said, smiling. It's like a national law. He thought she would smile, but she didn't. I know you were there when I needed you, when I came flying off that end of the walkway like O.J. Simpson in that old Hearst ad. Maybe you saved me from eating the wrong pill on top of too much booze, or maybe I would have made it to the other side on my own, and it's all a big dramatization on my part. But it doesn't feel like that, not inside, where I am. She snuffed the cigarettes, only 2 puffs gone. I know you've been there ever since, and I've been there for you. We're good in bed. That used to seem like a big deal to me, but we're also good out of it. And now that seems like a bigger deal. I feel as if I could grow old with you and still be brave. I know you drink too much beer and you don't get enough exercise. I know some nights you dream badly. He was startled, nastily startled, almost frightened. I never dream. She smiled. So you tell the interviewers when they ask where you get all your ideas, but it's not true, unless it's just indigestion and you start groaning in the night, and I don't believe that, Billy. Do I talk? He said cautiously. He could remember no dreams at all, good or bad. Audra nodded. Sometimes, but I can never make out what it is you say. On a couple of occasions you have wept. He looked at her blankly. There was a bad taste in his mouth. It trailed back along his tongue and down his throat like the taste of melted aspirin. So now you know how fear tastes, he thought. Time you found out, considering all you've written on the subject. He supposed it was the taste he would get used to if he lived long enough. Memories were suddenly trying to crowd in. It was as if a black sack in his mind were bulging, threatening to spew noxious dreams. Images from his subconscious and into the mental field of visions commanded by his rational waking mind. And if it happened all at once, it would drive him mad. He tried to push them back, and succeeded, but not before he heard a voice. It was as if someone buried alive had cried out from the ground. It was Eddie Kasparak's voice. You saved my life, Bill. Those big boys, they drive me bug shit. Sometimes I think they really want to kill me. Your arms, Audra said. Bill looked down at them. The flesh there had humped into goose flesh. Not little bumps, but huge white knobs like insect eggs. They both stared, saying nothing, as if looking at an interesting museum exhibit. The goosebumps slowly melted away. I think it's so goofy how he called it goosebumps after calling it goose flesh earlier. Stick to one, Stephen King. Anyway, that's so stupid, sorry. He looked... Where was I? In the silence that followed, Audra said, and I know one other thing. Someone called you this morning from the States, and he said you have to leave me. He got up, looked briefly at the liquor bottles, then went to the kitchen and came back with a glass of orange juice. He said, you know I had a brother, and you know he died, but you don't know he was murdered. Audra took in a quick snatch of breath. Murdered? Oh, Bill, why didn't you ever... Tell you? He laughed. that barking sound again. I don't know. What happened? We were living in Derry then. There had been a flood, and it was mostly over, and George was bored. I was sick in bed with the flu. He wanted me to make him a boat out of a sheet of newspaper. I knew how from day camp the year before. He said he was going to sail it down the gutters on Witcham Street and Jackson Street because they were still full of water. So I made him the boat, and he thanked me. And he went out, and that was the last time I ever saw my brother George alive. If I hadn't had the flu, maybe I could have saved him. He paused, right palm rubbing his left cheek as if testing for beard stubble. His eyes, magnified by the lenses of his glasses, looked thoughtful. But he was not looking at her. It happened right there on Witcham Street, not too far from the intersection with Jackson. Whoever killed him pulled his left arm off the way a second grader would pull a wing off a fly. Medical examiner said he either died of shock or of blood loss. Far as I could see, it didn't make a dime's worth of difference which it was. Christ, Bill! I imagine you wonder why I never told you. The truth is, I wonder myself. Here you've been married 11 years, and until today you never knew what happened to Georgie. I know about your whole family, even your aunts and uncles. I know your grandfather died in his garage in Iowa City, frigging around with his chainsaw while he was drunk. I know those things because married people, no matter how busy they are, get to know almost everything after a while. And if they get really bored or stop listening, they pick it up anyways, by osmosis. Sure. Or do you think I'm wrong? No, she said faintly. You're not wrong, Bill. And we've always been able to talk to each other, haven't we? Neither of us has got so bored neither of us got so bored it ever had to be osmosis, right? Well, she said, until today I always thought so. Come on, Audra. You know everything that's happening to me over the last 11 years of my life. Every deal, every idea, every cold, every friend, every guy that ever did me wrong or tried to. You know I slept with Susan Brown. You know that sometimes I get maudlin when I drink and play records too loud. Especially the Grateful Dead. Grateful Dead slander. Especially the Grateful Dead, she said, and he laughed. This time she smiled back. You know, the important stuff, too. Things I hope for. Yes, I think so, but this... She paused, shook her head, and thought for a moment. How much does this call have to do with your brother, Bill? Let me get to it in my own way. Don't try to rush me into the center of it, or you'll have me committed. It's so big and so quaintly awful that I'm trying to sort of creep up on it. You see, it never occurred to me to tell you about Georgie. She looked at him, frowned, shook her head faintly. I don't understand. What I'm trying to tell you, Audra, is that I haven't even thought of George in 20 years or more. But you told me you had a brother named... I repeated a fact, he said. That was all. His name was a word. It cast no shadow at all in my mind. But I think maybe it cast a shadow over your dreams, Audra said. Her voice was very quiet. The groaning, the crying. She nodded. I suppose you could be right, he said. In fact, you're almost surely right. But dreams you don't remember don't really count, do they? Are you really telling me you never thought of him at all? Yes, I am. She shook her head, frankly disbelieving. Not even in the horrible way he died? Not until today, Audra. In case we forgot her name. She looked at him and shook her head again. You asked me before we were married if I had had any brothers or sisters, and I said I had a brother who died when I was a kid. You know my parents were gone, and you've gotten so much family, and it all took up your entire field of attention. But that's not all. What do you mean? It isn't just Georgie that's been in that black hole. I haven't thought of Derry itself in 20 years. Not the people I chummed with, Eddie Kasperack and Richie the Mouth, Stan Uris, Bev Marsh. He ran his fingers through his hair and laughed shakily. It's like having a case of amnesia so bad you don't know you've got it. And when Mike Hanlon called, who's Mike Hanlon? Another kid that I chummed with after Georgie died. Of course he's no kid anymore. None of us are. That was Mike on the phone. Transatlantic cable. He said, hello, have I reached the Denborough residence? And I said, yes. And he said, Bill, is that you? And I said, yes. In real time. And he said, this is Mike Hanlon. It meant nothing to me, Audra. He might have well been selling encyclopedias or Burl Ives records. And he said, "From Derry." And when he said that, it was like a door opened inside of me and some horrible light shined out. And I remembered who he was. I remembered Georgie. I remembered all the other things. All this happened like that. I should have said Bill snapped his fingers. Sorry about that. Bill snapped his fingers like that. And I knew he was going to ask me to come back to Derry. Yeah. He took his glasses off, rubbed his eyes, looked at her. Never in her life had she seen a man who looked so frightened. Back to Derry, because we promised, he said. And we did. We did, all of us kids. We understood the creek that ran through the barrens, and we held up hands in a circle. We cut our palms with a piece of glass, so it was like a bunch of kids playing Blood Brothers, only it was real. He held his palms out close to her. In the center of each, she could see a close-set ladder of white lines that could have been scar tissue. She had held his hands, both his hands, countless times, but she'd never noticed these scars across his palm before. They were faint, yes, but she would have believed. And the party! That party! Not the one where they had met, although this second one formed a perfect bookend to the first one, because it had been the rat party at the end of the pit of the Black Demon Chute. It had been loud and drunk, every inch of the Topanga Cannon do. I don't know what any of those words mean. I must be honest with you. But they're at a party and it's rowdy. Perhaps a little less bitchy than some of the other LA parties she had been to, because the shoot had gone better than they had any right to expect, and they all knew it. For Audra Phillips, it had gone even better because she had fallen in love with William Denborough. And that's where we're stopping.